Good afternoon, good evening, and good morning, depending on where you are in the world. Welcome to COMIT's Happy Hour. Thank you very much for joining us today. This is a place for a friendly chat about hot topics over a beer, a beverage, or whatever takes your fancy. Today's title is Disruptive Technology and Health and Safety, and a match made in heaven. Today's session is an intro to a project that was established on behalf of the COMIT members and for the wider construction industry. COMIT2 Safety exists to help owners, construction companies dramatically improve health and safety through the use of innovation and technology. Incidentally, if you have a QR code reader, maybe have it handy for later. I've got a couple of QR codes to share. So, in context, working safely. That's an AFR graphic for, well, since 2003, as you can see. And as you can probably see, the trend line is going down and has continued to go down. I haven't got updated figures from that, but the figures I'll show you in a second or two will highlight where we've come from and where we're going. So that's over a 16-year period. We've fared reasonably, but reasonable is not good enough when it comes to the safety of our workers. I think the message is accidents can be avoided. As you'll hear from the session, we've got a great panel today. To move forwards, we must think differently and use technology. So we have come a long way, and again, to put some context into the matter, fatal injuries since 1900 to 2021, you can see that figure's dropped significantly. And the rate of fatal injury per 100,000 workers from 81 to 2001, as you can see, it stands at 0.38 AFR. Again, a bit more context. We've come a long way. Anybody know where that is? Well, I'll tell you, it's the Forth Rail Bridge. I'm not going to read through this list, but it was opened in 1890. And during the construction of that project, 57 lives were lost. It employed 4,000 men. It's an incredible feat of engineering. If you ever stand next to it, if you get an opportunity to stand next to it, you just see how vast it is. It's put together with rivets, and there's 6.5 million rivets in the thing, and quite a number of the injuries and the fatalities were caused by falling objects, and they used to throw the rivets from the hot furnaces right the way to the top, along the bottom, wherever they were fixing, and quite a number of them were missed and caused issues, injuries and fatalities. One thing I will say is we're not just limited to proximity sensors or other technology aspects that can improve safety. If we look at design, some of you that's involved in design will know that that structure was designed using what we would call primitive methods, but effective methods. And if I can just click on the next, you'll see that that's how they put that design together. Simple test to see if it would work. And as you can see, those guys sat on that little simple structure. Was a replication. It was an opportunity to test the design. So anyway, without further ado, I want to get into today's session. A little bit about COMIT first. We are a community, a collaboration platform. We get together 4 days a year. We run regular webinars such as this one. We run projects also as this one. There's no better way to early adoption than practically proving it. We run a drone community. The drone community started as a project and now has its own following. We partner with other organisations and we run events. Community Days being one example and conferences being another. We have a full programme next year planned, 3 community days and 1 conference, which is in central London. If you've got any questions during the session, on the dial box on the side, just drop your questions in there and fire them over. We've already got quite a few questions in there, but I'm pretty sure we'll skip through those and hopefully answer those as best we can. If you have any more questions, please send them in. So I'm now going to introduce you to the panel, today's team, and boy, have we got a lineup today. So without further ado, on the left, starting with Paul. Everybody bring the cameras back in if you can, guys. We've got Paul from Snugs. Paul is the founder and CEO of Snugs. We've got Nathan Baker, CEO Institute of Occupational Medicine. We've got Matthew Norbury, founder and CEO of FC Laboratories. And we've got Adrian Walter. And Adrian is the UK business lead for SingFix. Welcome, gentlemen. Everybody turn the microphones on, please.
Just figured out. Thank you, Stuart. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah. So I'm not going to go any further, but I did say about QR codes. If you can click on the QR code in there, that will give you more information about what we're doing, and give you the opportunity to ask more questions as well. As I say, if you have any questions during the session, please put them into the dialog box on the right-hand side. So first up is Nathan. I'm going to load your first slide, and it's over to you, Nathan.
Thanks, Stuart. Little bit of context. So IOM is a research charity founded in 19.
Oh, we can't hear you, Nathan.
Can you hear me now?
You're very quiet.
Well, let's see if this is any better. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So IOM, founded in 1959 as a department of the National Coal Board, trying to work out why miners were dying of lung disease. 50 years on, we've worked on a whole raft of things, looking at safety and health, particularly through the workplace. What's really interesting as we talk about health and safety, and Stuart alludes to it, generally our safety stats in the UK have got better. We look after our workforce pretty well. We still unfortunately do have injuries and deaths. 19 people in 2021 died falling from height. And I'll come into a moment about a few other bits that probably are as concerning, if not more concerning. But what's really interesting for us as an organisation is as you look at the number of people who suffer from ill health and the impact that has, not just on them and their families, but on your organisations. So in construction, 74,000 people suffer from ill health. That is everything from stress to cancer and everything in between. 32 million days are lost a year because your people are ill. Now, you can round that up. That's a lot of money. But most importantly, that's a lot of time and a lot of capacity. And Stuart, if you'd flick the next slide on, please. What's really interesting about that for us is as you look at it, it's really telling that 39 people in total died. Oh, sorry, 19 people died falling from height. 3,500 died from cancer caused by exposure to stuff from the workplace. And yet we don't really talk about that. We don't really worry about that. And yet the impact of that is enormous. Because as you look a little bit broader from the deaths, you then look at the fact that there are 42,000 breathing and lung problems every year. And of that, you then look at the impact of the amount of time people spend away from work because they don't feel very well. On top of that is the cost, not just the cost to you as a business, but the cost to the individuals. Over 90% of the costs of being ill are borne by you, the individual. Now, that's an enormous burden on a lot of people. And it's one of the reasons why half of the people who work for you are stressed. They worry about stuff. There was a study that came out a fortnight ago that showed that 85% of the workforce is currently worried about money. Now, that may be no surprise. But what's really, really interesting about that is that 85% are 50% less productive than their colleagues who are not worried about money. So you've got a whole bunch of people, 40% of your workforce, who are fundamentally not there because they are worried about stuff outside of their normal daily control. When you then couple that with the fact that as a sector, we worry about a skill shortage, we worry about being able to deliver projects on time, to cost, to quality, there's a huge productivity gain from mobilizing ourselves and investing in our people and investing in their health. So what? The really interesting piece for us as an organization is about looking at health, safety and well-being in a holistic way and leveraging technology to help us to deliver what is really the opportunity for us. The incremental gains about protecting people falling from height are relatively small now. The gains from looking after our people longer term by looking after their health are potentially enormous. And it's something that we would love to be able to help explore with you as a sector and leverage our wider experience in other organisations to see if we can really, really unlock the talent that we've got within the sector and the capacity that exists. It's just been locked up because people feel and are ill. Stuart.
Thank you, Nathan. That's superb. A vast array of really hard-hitting facts and figures. Thank you for sharing that. I want to just ask a question. Some of the stress figure doesn't surprise me. Having been in the industry for a while, I used to see this quite a lot, but it was dismissed, and it's only now starting to be considered serious enough to do something about. And certainly the discussions I've had with you guys, there are opportunities. But is there any underlying research that would help drive this in the right direction? And the same goes for the other stats that you've put up on the screen. The breathing and lung issues or respiratory issues, as the HSE calls them, the cancer deaths. Is there any underlying, support information that would drive us to, investigate what's causing these?
Yeah, Stuart, there's lots and lots of data and there's lots and lots of evidence to indicate what is causing the stress. And I mentioned that money is a worry that people have. We see a lot of impact around being always on. So technology, as we are today, the number of people now who are able to work more remotely, more flexibly, whether they're a designer of a project or the site engineer or whatever it may be, the fact that a number of people, and COVID was a great example where we all worked from home, but people don't have the space to be able to work effectively from home. And what we've seen, and the data is very clear, is that people don't switch off. We did a report a couple of years ago about always on. If you've got your computer on the kitchen table and it just happens to flash up, you've got a message, well, I better just respond to that. And whilst a lot of sectors are always on, the health service is always on, lots in construction are always operating, there are ways and mechanisms that do exist that we can use to manage it. And there's lots and lots of data out there. There are lots and lots of research, both from organisations like ours, lots of universities. The HSE do a great deal of work in this area. So there's a real strong depth of empirical evidence, but also then some pragmatic opportunities and solutions that exist. Simple one around breathing and lung problems. What we do see a great deal is the failure to use the hierarchy of control that we're all well aware of, whether they be engineering controls or PPE. We often invert the hierarchy of control. We should finish with PPE, we often start with it. But the use of face coverings is a great example through COVID. But how many of your staff on site are wearing the correct PPE, the correct face coverings when they're cutting concrete? And there's some real practical pieces that indicate that behavior really needs to be unlocked, and the technology can help us to do that by helping to measure and monitor exposures. But also, most of the companies have got good processes, good procedures, and we need to lead and manage those effectively to make sure that the way that our people behave is supported by evidence that can be gathered using technology and that is managed effectively.
Yeah. Okay, Nathan, that's fantastic. Thank you very much. I'm sure that's given a few good insights. I have got some questions, Nathan, but I'm going to save them until we've heard from Adrian, Paul, and Matt. I'm going to invite Adrian up next. So just as a recap, Adrian, I'm going to put your slide up. Adrian Walter is the UK and business lead for SeamFix. Adrian, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Stuart, and thanks, Nathan, for teeing me up very well, because actually what we're doing is we're starting at the beginning, and one of the most important things is to get the workers fit for work. What does that mean? Well, actually, there's 3 million people in the construction industry. Probably over 2 million of those do safety critical work, right? So they not only need medicals to be able to do their inductions, to be in the construction environment, but they also need health surveillance to be constantly surveyed as they do the work in the industry. So what we've been looking at is actually looking at two industries. The one is the key partner to construction, which is the occupational health industry, and then how we can manage the intersection of occupational health into the construction industry. So I'll give a very simple example of, a worker comes in and needs a safety critical worker medical. So they have to leave the workplace, they have to go and have the medical, that say takes 45 minutes to an hour. We have to get that credential all the way, say, to the plant hire company, knowing that that person may not even work for the plant hire company, they might be a self-employed operator. So then they have to check all of the credentials of the worker. And then what we have to do is to get that worker onto a construction site to get them through a site induction, knowing that that worker actually could be fit with restrictions. They could have, say, epilepsy as an example, and they therefore can't work at heights. So it's very, very important that we look at this whole, I call it administravia, right? There's this whole body of administravia that happens in the industry, and it's actually quite sad that it's taking all of this time that could be spent more on the worker themselves, onto health surveillance. So what we're doing is looking at working with occupational health companies. We're digitizing things like the medicals and the health surveillance, but we're trying to tee them up in such a way that they're available to the industry. So then what we can do is, yes, we get the cost and productivity saving, we get better compliance because the certificates will be immutable. We get a reduction in carbon, right? Because today everyone's sending emails and doing PDFs and that. But what we're trying to do is to release that productivity back into the industry for the health and well-being of the workers. So that's sort of how we're organizing our technology. And it's not so much putting ourselves in the middle, it's almost creating a standard. This is the standard of the way that the industry should operate. There should be QR codes, there should be photos on certificates. That it's a standard that really what we're thinking about with this, and we're getting some, we're getting some good traction with the different stakeholders, because there's 250,000 just subcontractors in the construction industry, and they all tee up the workers that sit on the vehicles or deliver the materials, as an example, into the industry. So it's a complex ecosystem, but I think we're getting some strong interest in being able to just shift this whole level of administration, shift it back to value add work, which is around health and safety. So Stuart, let me pass it back to you there.
Okay, thank you for that, Aid. I've got one question to ask you. Actually, I've got a stream of questions, but the first one I'm going to ask you is convincing individuals, getting buy-in from them you touched on a little bit. What has been the successful route to getting them on board?
So I think if I take the different stakeholder groups, so the first is the occupational health themselves. If you talk to any occupational health company, they want to see the shift to health surveillance, right? They know how important health surveillance is, and they know that actually. So actually, if you can, when you talk to an occupational health provider, of course they're going to talk to you about an instance of where they had their certificates faked or something, right? But what they really care about, what the worker cares about, is the workers are transient, right? They're mobile. They're moving from site to site. They're moving, from different projects, even different companies. So it's important that their credentials are with them, right? So like things like phone apps are really important. If I think about, say, what the Hercules team have done, like it's just amazing what the Hercules team have done in terms of teeing up apps for their workers, as an example of that. And then if I talk about the construction companies themselves, they all see this. They all see this, that this administration is, I think you referenced it earlier, that there is sort of like a dearth of operators. So that they want to spend more time actually just finding the people, not having to just do all this credential management. So you have to almost break it down into each persona and have the value for each of them, is the short answer to that question, right? Yeah.
Okay, thank you. All right, we've got we've got several more questions. Please keep the questions coming in. We've got lots of opportunity. I'm going to next move on to Paul, and Paul is going to give his perspective on safety. Just 1 second. Let me advance the slides. 1 second. Okay, there we are. Paul, over to you.
Thank you, Stuart, and thank you for taking the time to listen to me, because my interest is about listening. It's about looking after our ears. So my specific interest of safety is, how do I look after people's ears? And clearly there is we were talking earlier about an endemic of non-fatal injury on the sites. And this is particularly where we fall into hearing loss, and it's general in the world, but even more so in noisy environments, in noisy workplaces. 1 in 3 of you are going to have hearing loss by the time you're my age. 1 in 8 of you are going to get tinnitus, because you're going to wake up one day and that ringing is not going to go away, and it just stays with you for the rest of your life. That causes individuals discomfort. It causes them stress. It makes them feel uncomfortable. So the key from our perspective is, yes, let's make it easier for the companies to provide equipment, but the key is you've got to get people to use it, and you've got to get them to use it because they want to use it. We all live in a world where we know that we shouldn't, not that I do anymore, but smoke, and we all know that we go to cities where it's noxious in different areas. But so we're all managing our own risk profiles as part of our daily life. So the key challenge is, if you can make what you do comfortable for people, comfortable to use it, comfortable to wear it, they're more likely to use it. And that's the bottom line. When we're talking about hearing protection, we're also in a world where the numbers put out by the industry or the manufacturer can be a little bit misleading. So, for example, when I go and buy my Volkswagen car, do I believe the figures that Volkswagen tell me? Forgive me, a manufacturer, I shouldn't be disingenuous to one particular manufacturer who got caught, but others who tell me that my car does so many miles to the gallon, right? The reality being is that when I bought that car, I never managed up to those expectations. Yeah, and that is quite atypical in which products are being pushed and marketed. So in my space, for example, products are rated on about how many decibels that they will trap out. Right? Well, that's great, all right? But if you only use that product 95% of the time in the workplace, that rating is half of what the manufacturer is saying it is, all right? So not only have you got to encourage people to use the product, you've got to get them to use that safety equipment all the time. In construction, we're really good. We're really good at getting our workforce to wear high vis, right? High vis is everywhere. We're really, really good now at getting people to wear hard hats. Do they actually put the chin strap on correctly? Well, that's the other issue, but at least they got it on their head. We were talking earlier about lung and breathing issues, and COVID has normalized at last. People are quite happy to walk down the street with a mask on their face. They wouldn't have done that in England 2 or 3 years ago. People in Japan have been doing that for years. Every time they got a little snivel, right? Yeah. So how do you normalize these things? How do you make them socially acceptable? How do you make it, yeah, that's the thing that I should be doing, and making it part of the daily routine. And to do that, make it simple, make it comfortable. So in our world, what we do is appreciate that once you actually make a hard hat fit somebody comfortably in their right size, they'll wear it more often. If their high-vis jacket is actually tailor-made, right, they're not going to impede on their work. They're going to feel it's more comfortable. If it's big and bulky, it's going to get caught up on things. So make it fit the person. We talked about the investment one makes in our staff. Well, our staff are vital to our business. Every single day off, we've already talked about the cost to us of the industry of losing a day out of work, the cost to the individual of losing that day out of work. So comfort is absolutely paramount. It improves effectiveness and it enhances the actual employee safety itself. We're in an area where hygiene is important. So things that go in your ears, there's a reason why when they talk about if there's any other discharge that comes out of your ears that's not wax, you've got a real problem, right? Yeah. So wax is good, but ear infection is really bad, right? It could be really bad. Not only can it be enhancing your hearing loss, it could be potentially damaging your brain, but it's also causing you ear infections. There's discomfort. You're not concentrating. You're thinking about your ears. You're now getting distracted. So your stress is going up. Are you going to be conscious of what's moving around while your ears are hurting? So just make it comfortable. Yeah. And coming from the employer point of view, the cost of the liabilities is going through the roof, right? The cost of legislation in the EU environment is increasing. And in North America, the cost of litigation is going through the roof. So my simple remit is, if you're providing a safety product to the worker, make it comfortable. That way they're going to own it more. That way they're going to feel loved more. That way they're going to use it more, because you want them to use it in that environment. And if they're using it, everybody is happy. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Paul. Just a question on the ear infections. I can remember being involved in a couple of operational schemes, widenings, demolition, and so on. One of the underlying causes was ear infections on the project, and demolition. You'd say that you will have had that all sewn up with, you've got to keep the dust down, you've got to do this, you've got to obviously wear all your PPE and everything else. But even so, just highlighting some of the points that you brought up, uncomfortable. The uncomfortable was when you're doing this sort of thing the wrong time of the year. It's cold, it's wet, it's everything else. So you've got umpteen layers on. You've got waterproofs on that really are not fit for purpose. And a little bit more of an investment in the product actually saw a significant increase in not only the length or life of the product, but also the wearing of the product as well. I mean, that went for not just the face masks, but also the ear defenders that they were wearing. They were still ill-fitting, don't get me wrong. But what I'm alluding to here is a little bit more investment in the product gave it greater longevity. So I absolutely agree with what you're saying. Another question I've got here, is there any underlying support information, research on the number of days lost due to ear infections that you know of that you could share? Is that something that you've got?
Number of days lost, I couldn't. But in terms of the number of people who are suffering hearing loss, 2018 worldwide, this was 500 million people. In 2030, it'll be 630 billion, and by 2050, it'll be close to 1 billion. Yeah. This is particularly we see our younger generation are normalised about putting things in their ears. That's really dangerous. Beats headphones sound great, they're killing your ears. AirPods, I'm not picking on you here, Matthew. AirPods are normalised. You're wearing them all day long. You need to turn the volume down. It can damage your ear. So the endemic of hearing loss is increasing. Not only the fact that we're in a noise, it seems to be in a noisier world anyway, in a noisier environment. And noise is not really considered. If I go on an underground train, I can tell you a half an hour journey on an old underground train is your maximum dose of noise damage for the day. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
So we in the world of ears are catching up where hard hats have been for years, high vis has been for years, dusk has been really prevalent in the last few years, and everybody's just starting to finally think about, well, maybe we should look after some ears as well.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Paul. That was very good. Thank you. So I'm now going to go on to Matthew. Let me bring your side up. Now, Matthew is the founder and CEO of FC Labs. So, Matthew, over to you.
Thank you very much, Stuart. If Paul's in the world of ears, we're in the world of the brain. FC Labs is a wearable neurotech startup. Our first product is Cortec, which you see on screen there, beautifully modelled by Terry, a construction worker in Liverpool. Essentially, we track and predict the risk of human error, which is a factor in almost all workplace accidents. So of those 441,000 non-fatal injuries that Nathan mentioned before, human error is a factor in almost all of them. But it's almost impossible to predict and even harder just to track, actually. But predicting until now has been impossible. Cortec addresses that problem head on. It's very simple, it's very small, it's very low cost, and essentially it tracks and predicts the risk of human error, whatever the underlying cause. Our risk of error fluctuates all the time for all sorts of reasons: stress and anxiety, lack of sleep, mental and physical fatigue, boredom, distraction, dehydration, the list goes on. We provide a very, very simple, actionable insight into when operatives are at greater risk. That is essentially what we do. We're like a Fitbit for the brain. I won't go into the scientific detail just now, but if anybody's interested, I would be delighted to chat. I think my main point just now, and hopefully we can get into some discussion perhaps around this, is that I think we're quite lucky as a business in that we're doing something. It's frontier technology. It's new. It's interesting. It's innovative. It's hopefully important. Hopefully, we believe anyway, having worked with the sectors, including construction, for the last 12 months or so, we believe we've developed a solution which is appropriate to a very, very big problem. So we find huge amounts of interest, doors are open, people get very excited. What I've been surprised at, and the number of attendees on today's webinar, I think, is a sort of attesting to this. More broadly, technology in health and safety doesn't seem to be that exciting, that interesting for some reason, and it absolutely should be, as Stuart touched on before. The improvements in injuries and fatalities in health have plateaued over recent years. As Nathan mentioned, mental health is a huge problem and is only increasing, or our awareness of it is only increasing. 2 suicides in the construction sector in the UK alone every single day. So there's some big problems, and technology is the answer, and that's really what we're here to help with. So yeah, looking forward to discussing how the group, how members of COMIT feel that we can help with that. Over to you, Stuart.
Thanks, Matthew. That was great. I've got a question here. I'm going to ask. So this is the benefits of the business opportunity, rather. If you're approaching a particular client, how do you say to them, this technology will set you apart from the crowd if you use it? How would you go about that?
Well, in terms of the problem that they appreciate, quite often we find that they've seen it previously just as an issue of fatigue, whether that's to do with lack of sleep. There is this global sleep crisis. None of us are getting enough sleep. None of us are drinking enough water. Not a host of things none of us are doing enough of. But certainly in high risk sectors, they see fatigue as a huge issue. Fatigue is one of the main underlying causes of risk of error, which Health and Safety Executive and National Safety Council and other bodies around the world research shows is a factor in almost all workplace accidents. So we don't have any challenges with our potential customers appreciating the problem and been absolutely desperate for a solution. To be quite frank, it's such a big problem. There are countless ways that people are trying to address it, from very simple stuff like giving workers free subscriptions to the Calm app to help them sleep better at night, for example, all the way through to technology which as a group I think we should be looking at, things like facial recognition and eye tracking, which is absolutely fantastic in certain circumstances, particularly driving, where you've got the ability to fix a camera pointing at people's faces, sometimes seen particularly by unions as somewhat intrusive, but it's effective. The challenge with a lot of the existing technology, the existing solutions out there, is that they're reactive, and unless we can track and predict something, it's always going to be a problem. If you're detecting when somebody's head's nodding, they're already in that danger zone of an accident being about to happen. Our technology is much more predictive, so we give them data which just simply hasn't been available before, allows them to make decisions from shift patterns, for example, looking at the impact of people taking breaks at different times for different lengths of time and so on. It all has impact, and if you can track that impact, you can measure and assess and learn, take action, adjust behaviour, and yeah, that's.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree wholeheartedly with that. Thank you. Got some more questions, and the next question I want to ask is for Nathan, or prior to Nathan. Why have we as an industry not looked at health in the same way that we've looked at safety? Nathan.
Oh, that's a good question. I think the reality is that safety and accident, you see the effect of it immediately. If you fall, if you trip, if you lose your hearing, or you get something in your eye, you feel it there and then, and there is an immediate response. We are quite well, we are very male in our general workforce. We have quite a macho mindset, whether we like that or not, and we can deal with stuff. What we don't then do, though, is deal with health. We don't generally, well, men generally don't go to the doctor anywhere near as much as women. We also see that men generally hide issues, and we see that, and Matt mentions the suicide rate in construction, which is high. You see similar in other male-dominated environments as well. And as a result, what we do is stuff gets kicked down the road. We're all very good at avoiding stuff unless it's there and then and right in front of us. So I think the reality is that what we do is we don't think about our health until it becomes fundamentally an accident. And musculoskeletal is a great example. How many times have people lifted something badly, jarred their back and gone, be right, no worries. 2 years later, you've still got a back problem, but now it's magnified it's causing you not to sleep well. Matt, a good point with regard to that. It's having an impact on everything else. You can't play with the kids. Your social and mental health's been affected just by the fact that you didn't deal with it. So I think the reality is that we need to accept that we need to treat health in the same mindset of safety and deal with it straight away. And that's both physical health and mental health. And I think some of the fantastic programs that have been, Mates in Mind is a great example, but the piece around mental health and talking, that's about dealing with it now. If you start to deal with stuff now, it becomes easier. And I think that's where we kind of fail to deal with health in the same way as safety. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Nathan. That's a very good answer. I've got a statement here, and it is a statement. This session is very educative. I'm not even sure that's the right word, on issues relating to health and safety, and great that it's in the construction industry. So I think we've answered that one. So I've got another question here, and I'm going to bring Adrian back in on this one. Just to expand on what we said before, I think there's a bit of duplication in this, but workers need to have the right credentials for the job. How do you see the technologies that we're talking about here evolving around credential management between the different stakeholders involved? Adrian?
Yeah, it's a great question. And look, no single technology company is going to be in the middle of this. It's what I said earlier, it's about being a standard, and we're going to look for patterns. So we always talk about the issuer, the subject, and the verifier. So the issuer could be the occupational health provider, it could even be a training company, or that's a type of credential as well. And you're just going to see technology move in that space. So the way that the credentials are being created in the first place. We did a webinar a little while ago, you and I, right? We did this webinar with AWS, and one of the things that really came up was this appetite for things like QR codes and photos and that on the certificate. So they're more verifiable actually, so we can get more sort of compliance and more the risk of that. So you at least for the issuers, you're going to see the technology move. And what I would say as well, because I've got a lot of friends in occupational health, right? It's not like they have big IT departments. It's not like they have the capacity to go and build things themselves. So they're going to need help. They're going to need help from tech companies with that. The subjects themselves, the workers, we all know this. We've all seen it ourselves. We're all getting apps for everything now. And I mentioned Hercules earlier, in terms of the work that Brusque and the team's done there in terms of issuing apps to the workforce is phenomenal. It's a great piece of work in terms of just making sure that they're empowering the worker. Whereas in the past, we didn't empower the worker. We just sent the certificates between ourselves. And the workers just didn't even get access to their own credentials when you think about it. So now it'd be what's called a self-sovereign model eventually, where they get to control their own destiny. And then this really complicated ecosystem of subcontractors all the way up to main contractors to joint ventures to government agencies, even when you think about it, but they all want to be connected. One of the things that we're exploring is the blockchain. So companies can come into the blockchain with us, right? So they can be a tier, in our blockchain, and then they can verify those credentials that are secured on the blockchain. So that's a slow mover, that one. We're typically still going to be working with attachments and portals and things like that for a while, but there is a whole other technology there that's ahead of us that I think the industry is going to get to. And I know, Stuart, you're very passionate about blockchain as well, but I think that's where we could see it move to. Yeah.
There's something I'm going to come on to in a minute, and that's worker reticence, certainly when it comes to screening. I'll just leave that for now, but just maybe have a think about that. We'll come back. The next question I'm going to ask is from the floor, and it comes in from Barry. Thank you, Barry. What does the panel feel is the biggest challenge to adoption of new technologies? Who wants to take that one? Who's up for that? Hands up. There you go, Matt.
I'll chip in on this. For ourselves, we're very much focused on working with the larger companies, largely because they have the resources, that sometimes dedicated innovation teams and budget to explore exactly what we're doing to explore new technology. It's what they're there for. But they also have the systems, the procedures, the protocols to utilize it, to implement it more easily. I think in a lot of cases, it's that concern that it's actually going to create more work, more hassle, more cost than the problem that it's actually solving. I think is the biggest reticence we come across in terms of the smaller companies who we talk to. It's their response is, of course, I see this problem. I would love to have a solution to help me address it, but I don't have the resources to implement it. I don't know, even simple things like just the procedures as to if we identified when somebody was unfit for work, essentially, what would that person do? And we've had this said exactly to us in these words. It's, do I send them home? Do I sack them? Do I get them a doctor? They don't have those procedures in place, and that's something that as a business we need to help them with. So that's where we find the reticence on the part of the business, and I think that's possibly why new technology can be somewhat scary in general. It sounds great, but it's probably actually going to cause me more work than it solves. A bit like being asked to use a new app. Every time I'm asked to use Slack or something like this that I'm not familiar with, my heart sinks slightly because it's actually making my life harder rather than easier.
Yeah. But Paul, do you want to add anything to that? You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, people don't like change, right? If you've got a solution, why would I want another solution? What's the normalized thing that happens in our workplace? You showed graphs earlier where you had this fantastic fall off in accidents. Where was that where hard hats came in? Right, because the head is the most vulnerable place for injuries, and so somewhere along that people I've got to put a hat on. Other places, I go skiing. Right, 20 years ago, you'd never wear a hat on a ski slope. Right, everybody wears a hat on a ski slope. So it's sensible. So I think it's how do you create that momentum? If people fundamentally don't like change, therefore, you've got to focus on the early adopters. You've got this group: early adopters, early acceptors, middle rump, and ones who will never do it in the first place. So, technology is how to engage with people who have a proactivity to accept that just because I have a solution today, just good enough is not necessarily good enough. I want to have something better. And it doesn't always lead to increased cost. It doesn't always lead to increased time. When those solutions actually result in decreased cost and decreased time, one sees the adoptions far easier to bring on board. So in my space, for example, foamy plugs, right? Foamy plugs are dominant within our industry. And they're dominant because they're considered to be really cheap, right? A couple of pence a piece, okay? But they're really dominant. But then you add that up over the year, because you're supposed to change them every morning and every afternoon, every shift, right? Add that up over the year. Actually, you're now about 100 quid a user, right? Well, that's what we do, right? So I get it all day long. What about the cost? Well, cost is the same. So what are the other issues? Well, you've got an issue about environmental waste. That's quite different. And what are the other issues? Well, foamy plugs are the reason why you're getting ear infections, right? Workers sitting there with dirty fingers on a construction site, rolling up a foamy plug and stuffing it into your ear is the quickest way you can want to find to create an ear infection. So what I'm just saying, and that's a simple tip. So I think that you've got to go after early adopters. You've got to demonstrate to them that change is good and that change is better. And then you start to create this kind of viral response within organizations. And we're seeing that within large organizations. We're getting into smaller groups where they've got real noise issues. and we're showing that we can apply a solution which is cost effective and all the way round. The workers are happy, the employers are more happy, and then that will then should spread out to become the norm. So yeah, make it easy, make it simple, and people will give it a try. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Nathan, do you want to add anything to that? Do you think we've done that one?
I think that's done. My only observation is that if we're not outcome focused on health, whether that's safety and health, actually we achieve nothing, because we will always look at what is it going to cost me today, not what is the whole life cost. And I know when we talk about construction, we invariably talk about capex and the build cost. We don't talk about the whole life benefit, and we don't look about safety in design. We don't look about effective health in design. And I think the opportunity here is to be able to demonstrate with the data that comes out of technology that it's of value. It's about picking the right data, because the biggest issue we see is data overload, and that leads to stress and so on and so forth. So for me, I would be looking and saying, pick the right data, leverage the technology, and we'll be in a good place.
Brilliant. Yeah. No, I agree. We got one question here which I keep coming back to. We've answered it in a roundabout way, but I'm gonna read it. The first part is a statement. The technology sounds really interesting. Actually, before I get to that, Barry, if I've answered your question, just give us a thumbs up. I think we've pretty much answered that. We've had 3 goes at it. Just give us a thumbs up if you're still there. Coming back to that question again, the technology sounds really interesting, but it's hard to get worker buy-in. I know I've asked that a couple of times already, especially when it comes to new equipment or new processes that seem to add not just time onto a day, but an extra bit of, we've got to do this. How would you persuade the skeptic? Now, we've all had the skeptic. What's each person's take on it? Let's go to Adrian first. How do you work on a skeptic? I know you've said that you've got opportunities to share data and everything else, but how do you work on that skeptic that it's even not satisfied when you've showed them the data? And don't get me wrong, there are people out there that really, you could show them absolutely everything, and I've been one of those people, believe it or not, and I'm still not convinced. But Adrian.
Yeah. I think where I'd start with this is you actually have to be the person, right? You have to do the outside in thing, as we call it, and actually try and understand it from their perspective, right? So you could see an example would be, like we was talking about musculoskeletal earlier, right? How many guys and girls come in to do their medicals, right? And then when they get to that question in the questionnaire on their medical, you know, have you ever had any back issues or anything? The answer is no, right? So you know that reticence is there, but if they genuinely felt that by changing that answer to yes, they were going to get help, right? So we have to solve the upstream issues for them. But you can also focus on the things that are good for them. And I sat down with a worker, and the worker just explained to me, he says, do you know something, Aid? I'm so fed up with every 2 or 3 weeks, I have to just keep organizing my credentials. Like I have to just keep sending them to another. So the freelance or the subcontractor community in this industry, they're moving around all the time. And he said, do you know something? If I had an app that just had this, I could just carry it around with me and I could have my health passport. So actually what I figured out was, on one hand, you know that there's a long game. You're going to have to help this person to just be honest, right, in the questions. You talk to any occupational health provider, they know that the skill of that occupational health provider is to tease out the answers and help the individuals, but at the same time focus on where the value is and look at it from an outside in and think about, if I was the worker that was this week in Manchester, next week in Newcastle, the 3rd week in Bristol, and I'm moving around, how would I want to organize my work? So I've always had this thing about technology as well, that is people first, sort of process second, and technology third, right? And I'm in tech, right? But I've always had those rules in the way that I think about life is just the outside in thing. So
No, I agree. We've got so can I ask the same question now of Matt? Convince the skeptic. What's your give us it a short fire way? What do you do to convince a skeptic?
Beyond showing them the data, to be honest, we've not had any problems convincing skeptics once they see the data. I think the benefit of our solution is that it's exceptionally simple to understand. Yeah. It's complex science, frontier technology.
Yeah.
So that there are always people who either misunderstand it or just don't believe it's even possible, actually, because 18 months ago we didn't know it was possible, to be perfectly frank. So we're always going to get skeptics, but because of the simplicity of what we do and the size of the problem it addresses, we have found, touch wood, and thankfully, that we're able to convince skeptics relatively quickly. But the same as Adrian's saying, you've got to understand put yourself in their shoes. You've got to understand their daily life, their daily working life, their business, their the need for the operational practicality, how the data is going to be used. I think it was the National Safety Council recently published a report of their members' biggest concerns, and right at the top, so it wasn't to do with any specific hazard or issue in terms of health and safety. Actually, it was more it was data, and not lack of data, too much data. That was their biggest concern. So being able to understand how your solution is going to genuinely benefit, how it's going to fit into their world, is really important. We've spent an awful lot of time doing that, and continue to, and that's what we've found convinces the skeptics.
Sure,
and I think, again, the thing is, if we hadn't developed the solution in the way we have, speaking to industry, finding out what their problems were, and then developing the solution to fit, we wouldn't be in a position to convince skeptics, because we would have developed something which we just created it in a vacuum without understanding what the actual needs were. And I think that's why some technology, well, to put it bluntly, just doesn't work or doesn't fit. No. It genuinely does add more complexity, more work, more cost, instead of actually solving problems.
Oh, okay, thanks for that, Matt. I'm conscious of time now. I want to finish up as close as the hour as we possibly can. I've got your thoughts on the skepticism, Paul. I've got Nathan's views on things, skeptic-wise. I'm going to move on, and I'm just going to thank everybody for their participation in the questions at registration. I tried to make it as easy as possible, and we've got some results. So we asked the question: have you seen innovative tech being implemented in your place of work to improve health and safety? And those are the stats. QR codes are prevalent in well, more than half the places. Brilliant, thank you for that. I hope that's useful information to feedback. Vehicle proximity sensors, the people-plant interface is becoming a bigger issue, and it's been that way for a long time, and it's good to see proximity sensors in place. It's not the full answer, but it's a heck of a lot better than it was. So I'm quite pleased to see that. And of course, the stress as well, Adrian touched on earlier, the environmental wearables is brilliant. The other thing as well is the current safety stats. 91% see an opportunity to improve safety in the workplace. That's brilliant. 9%, you need to tell us what the solutions are. Please send me an email. I need to share that information. Please get in touch. And of course, the other one is, well, it's almost a balance, 52-48. So thank you very much for helping on that. I want to just sort of draw everybody's attention to the project. We've got a LinkedIn page which we set up recently. Please join in on that, contribute, comment, send us your thoughts. Maybe you've got some really good ideas. Throw them across. We have this project. In the project side, we're looking at solutions, and we've got a collective solution insofar as we're sharing information on what we could do. And we're being asked as well by people within the industry. What are your thoughts and ideas? So it's a good opportunity to get involved. Come along and say hello and have a short discussion. We meet every week for half an hour. We guarantee it's half an hour every week. People need to be assured of their commitment. So please do have a look. So yeah, as we mentioned earlier, the metrics are plateauing, costs are increasing. This is a new approach. Protect your employees for tomorrow. Take action. Let me just skip through. I want to say thank you very much to everybody on the team today. If I can just get the right slide up, we'll be doing great.
Can I ask a question?
Just one second, Jerry. Yeah, sorry, go on, carry on.
I found it really sobering that in the construction industry, there's 2 suicides every single day. And I did see a survey, this was way before lockdown, where a huge amount of stress in the construction industry was actually about people away from home. So not only has the construction worker got stress for his job, but he's getting grief because he's actually away from home. And that being the case, probably less likely to ask for help because it's partly a personal matter. So I don't know how one gets around that combination of factors that might contribute. Just a thought. I don't know if that's still the case with people away from home, you know, getting grief, both work and at home.
A huge contributor to stress, absolutely. Yeah, sorry, go on.
Yeah. We find that also we're working with the logistics sector as well, and with long distance lorry drivers. It's a huge issue. They're away from home for days and weeks on end, and because stress and anxiety, other mental health issues, is such a huge problem. Number 1 cause of days off work last year. 2 suicides, as you say, is a horrendous statistic. It is also, in terms of what we're tracking, it's one of the main causes of increased risk of human error. So what we're doing, and I think this is what lots of businesses are attempting to do in cases where the issue or the underlying cause is a personal one. It's a line you really, it's difficult for businesses to cross, a bit like sleep. A business can't tell its employees to go to bed early. They don't appreciate that. But solutions like ours do empower and encourage the individual to take action to improve broader health and well-being. It has a benefit for the business, but it also has a benefit for themselves as well. I think that's the answer. Actually, is make in the same way that we try to make businesses understand the benefits for them. Businesses, in turn, need to work with us to show the employees what the benefit for them is more broadly. And I think that appetite's growing for that. There's a wave. So.
Okay, can I go around the table? Let me start with Paul, just to close out. Any closing comments and thoughts?
Thank you for the opportunity. Whatever safety equipment you've got, just use it more, and to make you use it more, make it more comfortable. That applies across the board. So thanks for the opportunity to be involved.
Great to have you on board. Thank you, Paul. Nathan?
It's think beyond safety and think about health, because actually safety comes from health, both physical and mental.
Sure. Thank you for joining us today and being part of the group. Adrian?
For me, it's better together. I think is the theme here. I think as a set of as a community, we're better together, right? I actually really enjoy being part of the COMIT platform because it gets me to talk to these panelists every single week. So I think we can really do some amazing things. It maybe will shift eventually from us going to all of the community with our ideas and them coming to us with their ideas and us solving it for them, right?
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you very much for being part of the group and the session today. And finally, Matt.
For me, Stuart, it's ambition. There's still so much work to do. 2 suicides a day, 441,000 non-fatal injuries. any deaths at all are unacceptable. And we're at that stage now where it looks to the outside world that that's just the price of doing business. 35, 36 people killed every year in construction. It's not acceptable. We should be working to zero. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for, I say, being part of the presentation, the planning and the delivery. Looking at the questions we've got, there's been some, we've educated a few people. I'd like to think that people will come back, and we've already got a number of offers of participation. Maker, yes, you can be part of the group. Reach out on the next slide. My email address is on there. Just drop me a mail if you wouldn't mind. The other thing I'll say as well, the next and final happy hour this year is the Toys for Techies Christmas special, backed by popular demand. We've got Fran Raybuck coming back for the 11th year, and boy has he got some specials this time. Please scan that QR code or go on the Commit website and register for that one if you will. It's always great to see what's good and great and new and exciting. Particularly, he's promised me this year a drone so small you can't see it. So I'm interested in what that's all about. I think it's just words, to be honest, but we'll see. We'll see. The other thing I will say is, if I can just get the next slide, we have got events next year. We've got 2 dates in March that are to be confirmed, but it's one or the other. We've got a conference on the 31st of May, 1st of June, which is in central London. That's booked and is being planned. If you want to be involved in that, you're very welcome. We have a community day in September. That will be confirmed soon. And we've got one on the 30th of November, which is going to be at IFS member, which is in Staines. Been there a number of times. Fantastic venue, and we're very much looking forward to that. So I'll say thank you once again. Everybody have a great weekend. The recording will be up as soon as it's downloaded, which might be later today, it might be tomorrow, it might be Monday. Depends on how the computer feels. But thanks very much, and yeah, brilliant. Once again, great session.
Bye everyone, well done, well done.
All the people that tuned in too, thank you.
Yeah,
all the best. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.